So there's nothing to suggest that there is going to be a Bionicle Generation 3 in 2025. But I want to play with this idea for a second because I think that if, no holds barred, Lego decided to put Bionicle back on shelves. Yes, it's going to have competition with other themes on shelves. Sure, it's more than likely that if they were going to do so, they would rely very heavily on SCCBS because that is the system that they are currently developing. And I think it's a good system overall. It has its kinks to iron out, sure, but the major issue, in my opinion, is, to me, Bionicle is sort of a gateway into Lego, but it's a gateway into fandoms in general. One of the things I like so much about Bionicle Generation 1 especially, but also Generation 2, is how able you are to build, how free you are to build something with very few pieces. Yes, there are Bionicles out there that people have made that are very elaborate, but you don't have to get elaborate with your builds. When you look at something like the Toa Mata, a limb is often one piece, and even at its most extreme, let's say, you have a set like Pohatu Fantoka, whose arms minus the weapons are maybe like 10 pieces? That's a lot of pieces, but it is kind of a one-off set, and the arm in that case is the gimmick for that set as well, so I get it. The problem with CCBS, though, is that its limbs are often built up. They kind of have to be, right? Because they're system-based. That's not a bad thing in and of itself, but that starts to drive price points up after a while, because as the price reflects the parts on the box, if you want those parts to look more unique between builds, you're going to have to tack on a lot of things. This seems like a direction Lego is much more willing to go now. We've seen a lot of very specialized pieces being produced for SCCBS builds, new armor pieces, and I think that this is a fantastic direction to go, but it is a slippery slope, especially if you are someone who prefers your Legos to keep simple shapes. And rightfully so. I think that there's definitely an argument to be made in both directions, so that's not the point of this video. But if you are to create an SCCBS system and utilize it for Bionicle sets, what characters do you create? Because you could retread old ground, creating the Toa Mata sets much in the same way as the Tahu set that we got earlier last year, but this could get stale pretty quick. The thing is, with the Toa Mata in 2001, it kind of works for them. First of all, they were very limited on what parts they had to use in the first place because this was the introduction of a brand new theme, and there were still a lot of new molds in 2001 Bionicle. But that's not something I think you would see with SCCBS. So oftentimes, you'd be building sets whose arms, whose limbs, whose legs, whose etc. would look very similar piece to piece, build to build. And if they didn't, then they're just retreading old ground in what is my opinion an inferior aesthetic. That's not to say that these system sets are bad, because I don't think that they are. But you're essentially trying to capture lightning in a bottle twice, if that makes sense, right? The Toa Mata, for all intents and purposes, are as perfect as they need to be. That is not to say that they're perfect sets, because I don't believe any set is perfect, and there are absolutely ways that you could modify them further, especially with pieces that exist today. But if you were to take your Lego system sets and create, say, a Pohatu SCCBS figure, that'd probably be the one more people would buy. I understand brown's not the highest selling color, but at the same time, you know that the build would be different because at the very least it'd be upside down, right? So things would be tackled a little differently, and that's admirable. But the problem starts to showcase itself when you understand that, okay, I've got this set, it's, say, 200 to 300 pieces, so maybe around the $20 mark. Well, with inflation, maybe 25 to 30. But let's just hope the $20 mark for a moment. Could I go out and buy myself a Toa Mata Pohatu for about $20? Yeah, absolutely. Every day of the week. I know that there are a lot of people that like to upsell this stuff and like to mark it way up. It's not necessary though. These are incredibly common sets on the secondhand market because they sold very well in the early 2000s. Lots of people have them, even 20 plus years later. So oftentimes I still find Toamata sets popping up here and there with a pretty drastic markdown, sometimes being sold for the amount they were being sold back then, with which, given inflation, is actually cheaper, and sometimes even less. It's not uncommon for me to find a Toamata for $5 to $10. Sometimes maybe a piece is missing, whatever the case. Sure. So if I could have the original for half the price of a set that looks to dress itself the same way, I think that that's a problem. You see what I'm saying? I think that SCCBS is a fantastic system, and I hope that LEGO continues to work into it. But I think for Bionicle specifically, it kind of arrives dead in the water, you know? Because it just feels like the best it can try to do is capture something that's already been done. Now, that said, new takes on the characters for a possible Generation 3, I think, is a good idea, or the introduction of a new system. I don't see LEGO going that route because of the cost. And again, this is all hypothetical anyway. As I mentioned at the start of the video, there's no guarantee any of this happens. It's probably not likely. I imagine we would have heard something by now, but hey, fingers crossed, right? At the end of the day, Bionicle is special. You know, it's a fandom unlike many others, and it is something that you can be creative with. So I don't think it's dangerous to be creative if you are a brand like LEGO. Giving us new characters could always be a fun little nod, and you could always put in Easter eggs referring to old characters, or even including parts in sets so that maybe you could turn this character into one of the older characters, including instructions or just inspirational photos, whatever the case, right? That does involve, of course, a lot more labor, but this is all hypothetical at the end of the day. So how would I handle a Bionicle Generation 3? I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know a good reality for a Generation 3. I want it to be a thing. And I think that today, where Bionicle does its best is minifigure form, if it's a new product. And here's my reason why. If it is SCCBS, the best I can see it doing, the best case scenario, is mimicking what has been done. There is, fraction of a chance that LEGO strikes the iron while it's hot, hits a really good design, has just a handful of new pieces that people really like, that helps to capture that old allure. But don't bet on it. That's really difficult. Second, I don't think LEGO makes a new system, not off the ground anyway, mostly because of the expense that goes into that. It has only gotten more expensive to create new parts as time has gone on. The molds for these pieces are exceptionally expensive, exorbitantly so. There's reasons why many people have not been able to make their own Bionicle pieces, because the equipment costs a lot. And yeah, you can resin cast, but it has its limitations, sure. It's not to say that nobody is doing it. Of course there are people, but here's the thing. Minifigures are tried and true. LEGO knows that they work. And at first I thought to myself, well, minifigures couldn't work because we have something like Ninjago on shelves already. And Ninjago's doing a good job as it is for LEGO. So Bionicle would be competing with that, which is true. But so is Monkey Kid. Monkey Kid seems to be doing okay so far. Dreams seems to be doing okay so far. I would say Monkey Kid and Ninjago have the most similarity there. Dreams is a little bit more out of the box from those two, but they definitely all share kind of similar audience, right? That's why I proposed the idea that I did with the sort of board game / diorama sets, because those sets were designed around functions within the builds themselves. They were a hybrid of system for the landscape and for the minifigure characters, and used Technic parts for the Rahi, because in a way, yes, this was retreading the original story, gathering the golden masks. Nothing has changed there. But at the very least, I think that minifigures sell. That's the most major point. In my opinion, there are, yes, a lot of old fans that want Bionicle minifigures. There are a lot that don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people that would be very upset with a Bionicle Generation 3 in minifigure form that would think, oh, this is alienating the property. Sure, I guess. I mean, there are old Bionicle sets from System, so I think the argument's a little bit moot there. But also, SCCBS, the same people would be arguing about that alienating the system as well. And like I said, Lego, I don't see them pumping a lot of money into a theme like Bionicle today. They don't have a reason to risk it, you know? Back in the early 2000s, like, people always count how Lego was going bankrupt or whatever the case, right? And so, yeah, they had a lot to lose. They also had a lot to gain by taking this risk, and they did so. You know, they tested the waters, and as far as I can tell, it did well enough for them. And clearly Bionicle was a success, because here we are today, and Lego's one of the largest companies in the world when it comes to producing toys, and IPs for that matter. I think that System, it's a delicate balance for what it's worth. And a return to Technic, at the very least, for animals, for Rahi, is pretty smart, in my opinion. Here's the thing, though. Do you include... This is the hard part, because I keep going back and forth on this. Do you include the mask gimmick? I don't know. Because here's the thing. Masks are small on minifigures, right? And we would want them to represent the original masks probably as much as possible, or to be their own style altogether. I think more fans would want them to mimic, but there's definitely a story to be had, you know, with going maybe even both directions. It's just about testing the waters first, seeing if the brand, if the product can even sell. And I think it can. So what I think I would do is I would start with this as a Generation 3, somewhat retreading how Generation 1 Bionicle handled its introduction. Not necessarily the locations, not even necessarily the characters to start with. And the idea that I had is that maybe, possibly, they start off with custom masks, right? Still very clearly the How, the Miru, the Picari, whatever, but a new style, a new take on each of these masks. And I've seen multiple creators design minifigure scale versions of masks that are their own unique take, and I love them. They've looked excellent. I also think, however, people are obviously going to buy into this if the sets have classic style masks too. So my thought was, you could have a legacy line. I don't know how I'd want to handle this yet, because again, I don't have access to any of this stuff, and part of the fun of this video is brainstorming. But suffice to say, people are going to want the old masks in minifigure scale, and people are going to want new masks as well. That's difficult, of course, because it's a lot of molds, but I think it can be done. Thankfully, they are small pieces. I think they're pretty sprue friendly as well, but that's for a different topic. But like I said, at some point, maybe soon, I'll put out some more videos talking about the landscapes that I designed. Because I didn't just design the two that I've made videos on already, and I will link to one of those videos at the end of this one as well, so you can see it. I really love this idea, and I think that there's a lot that can be done by incorporating gimmicks into the landscapes themselves. So yeah, the minifigures won't have functions, that's whatever. But if the landscapes have functions to make up for it, if the Rahi have functions to make up for it, I think it's okay. But yeah, that's going to be pretty much it for this one, guys. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It does really help out the channel. And of course, you can join in the conversation with the links in the description. Patreon is down there as well if you want to help support me and what I do here. And then, of course, you can always leave a comment letting me know your thoughts. How would you handle a Generation 3 Bionicle? It is tough. It really is. With all of that said, though, make sure to watch the videos linked at the end of this one, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.